This is a public service announcement about Bovine Spongiform Encephalopathy, BSE, or more commonly known as mad cow's disease. In 1986, Great Britain was one of the first nations to notice the rising concern of mad cow's disease among their livestock. In 1988, the amount of cases were dramatically rising and becoming concern to local and federal government officials, to which in response in the 1990s, the British government insisted this disease posed no threat to humans and was what was known as a dead-end host in the cows. The reason the British government had this reaction was because of their previous interaction with scrapie-infected sheep, who, based on their knowledge, were unable to infect any other animals with their illness. In order to reassure the public even further, the then Secretary of State for the Environment, John Gummer, appeared on live television with his daughter, encouraging everybody to eat beef, specifically burgers, and declared British beef to be completely safe. Between 1992 and 1993, during the height of the outbreak, about 1,000 cows per week were being diagnosed with BSE. In an attempt to stop the spread, a sum total of over 4 million cattle were slaughtered in order to attempt to stop this during the entire span of the epidemic. The prion itself, which causes this disease, is abnormally folded, and instead of alpha helices, it instead, on much of its surface, has beta sheets. Now, this is a problem because this prion is very good at converting wild-type proteins into its infected variant. So, with enough of this prion inside of the host, it will start converting the correctly formed and folded proteins into its infectious type. The reason that these beta sheets are important is that enough of these beta sheets linked together can cause cell death. And hence the spongiform part of BSE, this cell death ends up leading to holes in the brain, which happen to look like sponges. Once the symptoms do start showing, however, behavioral changes, aggression, sensitivity are some of the main ones to be seen. But as time increases, once the symptoms show up, it gets worse and worse, usually leading to lameness, coma, and eventually death. How does one become a mad cow, however? It was theorized that the first prion subset was spontaneously formed through random mutation. But unlike a virus, it did not spread from peers. So how did the outbreak even get started? The eating of contaminated meat and bone meal that is also contaminated with the prion is one way that transmission can occur. This was incredibly unfortunate for many farmers, especially the British, as one of their practices was to grind up old cows and recycle them for food for the new generation. This is, of course, an issue because recycling dead cows also means recycling the prions, and therefore every generation was being reinfected through the same feed. Another issue is that due to the long incubation period, by the time symptoms and signs started showing up, they had already been reinfecting their cattle for several years now. So finding the entirety of the spread and the length at which it spread to now becomes a Herculean task. On top of all this, the groups that were able to be infected were not just limited to the cattle, but instead also humans and domesticated house cats. At the height of the epidemic, the estimated prevalence rate of BSE ranged from over 100 cases per million cattle. The estimated incident rate annually was approximated to be 2 to 3% throughout the affected herds. As mad cow's disease is fatal and incurable, there was a hyper-focused effort to eliminate this disease. The main avenue they took was through preventative control measures. By controlling what actually went into the food supply, they were able to prevent the prion from ever entering it in the first place, and therefore limiting its extent and spread. One major change was preventing animals over the age of 30 months from entering the food chain. This prevents the spontaneous prion emergence that happens more often in older cattle. Since 2003, there have only been 6 noted cases of this disease in America, all but one of which were a result of spontaneous prion emergence. Ultimately, epidemiology and science along with it is in an arms race with bacteria, viruses, prions to stay one step ahead of the curve. And the disease clock is ticking, and we don't know the next time a new disease will emerge. So it is very important to look at the past, what has been done to fix it, and how we can use the knowledge we've obtained to slingshot science forward to best prepare ourselves for the next emergent disease.